If you were hunted down by an invisible serial killer with no idea where he's hiding, what would you do? I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the invisible killer in Hollow Man. This scientist's greatest discovery will become his biggest mistake. Sebastian here is trying to find the perfect formula for his medical research, but so far every simulation has been a failure. Frustrated, he paces to clear his head when he suddenly has an idea. The man runs over to his computer to change the molecules and is thrilled to find that it's a stable compound. He calls his ex-girlfriend Linda and tells her to prepare for an experiment, but they have no idea it's going to get them all killed. Later that day, this researcher Matt checks on the animal test subjects and approaches what looks like an empty cage. But when he leans closer, an invisible creature lunges for him. Putting on a pair of heat detection goggles, it shows him that the gorilla inside is angry, and she's about to be tested in a horrifying experiment. The research team gathers in this operating room where the invisible animal is strapped to the table, but just before Matt injects the serum, Sebastian stops him. Taking the injector himself, he administers the chemical, and they watch it flow through the creature's veins, revealing its internal organs. Everything seems to be going well, but suddenly, the gorilla's heart rate begins to spike, and the creature flatlines. Acting quickly, Linda grabs the defibrillators and shocks the animal until its heart rate stabilizes. The gorilla has become fully visible, and the crew are amazed their experiment worked. But soon Sebastian here will be using this technology to murder everyone in this room. The next morning, the scientist presents his results to officials at the Pentagon. They funded his research to create an invisibility serum for military use, but the man makes it clear they've been struggling to stabilize the compound and lies that it's not ready for production. Believing him, the supervisor insists he bring them results soon, or else they'll replace him with someone who can get the job done. With that, the meeting ends, and the researchers leave the building, but they demand to know why the scientist lied. The man explains he wants his team to get the credit for their breakthrough, and proposes they start testing the serum on humans instead. Matt points out that it's way too risky, but Sebastian argues they'll earn a Nobel Prize if they succeed. Reluctantly, the others agree and get into his car, but that will be the biggest mistake of their lives. The next morning, they begin the experiment and strap him down to the operating table. Linda here hands him the injector, letting the man administer the invisibility serum, but nothing seems to happen. The experiment is starting to look like a failure, but suddenly the man bends backwards in pain. His vital signs are all over the place, and it's clear something has gone wrong. Slowly, he begins to turn transparent, and the others stare in shock as he disappears in front of their eyes. The test worked perfectly, and the team gives the man time to rest while he gets used to his new body, with no idea it's going to backfire on them hard. Okay, this is a terrible idea. The scientist not only volunteered to be the first human test subject, but lied to the US government about his breakthrough. He's turned down the resources and expertise of the Pentagon, and for a man who calls himself a genius, this was a very stupid move. The Pentagon has over 26,000 employees with an immense budget to invest in breakthrough technology, and using their resources to help advance their own work is the obvious decision. Even if they were going to take his research into human testing themselves, they would have needed Sebastian's expertise in order to do it, and it's a lot more likely the experiment will be successful with their help. Now, the biggest problem is that the crew didn't think twice about letting Sebastian become the first human test subject. This guy is the lead researcher, and it means he knows more about this technology than anyone else. If he dies on the table, nobody else has the knowledge or experience to continue the research, and it will be a massive waste of everyone's time. The second reason is that this man is a complete narcissist. He's constantly comparing himself to God, and even has the balls to lie to the Pentagon for the hopes of winning a Nobel Prize. This guy will do anything to get what he wants, and if a man like this was suddenly invisible, you can guarantee he's going to take advantage of it in the worst ways possible. We need to rein this guy in now before it's too late, and that's why if it were me, I would set up the operation and insist on putting him under sedation first. If you look at this gorilla, the creature is clearly going through a lot of pain, and it caused the ape's heart rate to spike dramatically before flatlining. Reproducing the exact same experiment would be an idiotic thing to do without trying to improve the procedure, and if we use this logic, it might convince him to let us knock him out. Now, you might be thinking it would be easier to use the tranquilizer guns on the man, but this would be a huge mistake. As we've seen, the researchers have only used these to deal with the gorilla, so the dosage is specifically designed for large animals. Injecting that much into a human would most likely be fatal, so our best option is to convince him that being sedated would save him from a lot of unnecessary pain during the experiment. Once he's passed out, the clear decision here is to throw him in a locked room under constant surveillance and report the real findings to the Pentagon. Not only will this save our careers, but it will also prevent the risk of having a full-blown psychopath walking around with the power of invisibility. Hours later, the researchers check on their test subject when he suddenly freaks out and explains that the room is too bright. They quickly make it more comfortable for him, and the woman explains he's now sensitive to light because his eyelids are transparent. Frustrated, the invisible scientist gets out of bed and decides to meet with the rest of the crew. They're all pleasantly surprised there don't seem to be any side effects, but soon they'll discover he's an absolute monster. Later, Linda and Matt take him to a private room where he will be monitored for the next 3 days. They leave it to the redhead Sarah to watch over the invisible man that night, but the researcher quickly falls asleep in her chair with no idea that the scientist has snuck into the observation room. She suddenly jolts awake and realizes that her top has been undone, but when she calls out, nobody responds. That's when the woman notices that not only was the door left open, but the man's bed is empty. It's clear something happened while she was asleep, but Sarah can't tell if it was all a dream. After 3 nights of observation, the crew sets up the lab to turn him back to normal. They inject the serum into his body to make Sebastian visible again, but something begins to go wrong. Suddenly, the man's vital signs start going crazy, and the research team does everything they can to stabilize his condition, but there's a problem. They've managed to save his life, but he's now stuck in a transparent body, and they have no idea how to fix it. Later that day, he wakes up in bed and realizes that the procedure failed. Determined, the scientist insists they should continue the research, but he'll need something to make the experience more comfortable for the time being. The team creates fake skin for him to wear while they figure things out, but it won't be enough to keep the man sane. After 6 full days, they still haven't found a solution, and Sebastian is starting to reach his limit. The man is getting nauseous, and frustrated, he decides to get some fresh air. That night, he tells his co-worker he's going outside, and the guy chases after him, insisting this is against protocol. The man doesn't care and rides the elevator back to the surface, leaving for his apartment. When he arrives, the scientist grabs some belongings to bring back to the lab, when he suddenly notices his neighbor coming home from work, and it gives him a horrible idea. Later, the woman is getting out of the shower when she hears the doorbell ring. Putting on a robe, she goes to see who it is and takes a look into the hall, with no idea that the invisible man has just entered her apartment. Meanwhile, the co-worker Linda has found out about the scientist's escape and heads to his apartment to look for him. Searching his bedroom, she's shocked to discover his clothes and mask have been taken off. She realizes he could be anywhere and calls her boyfriend, warning him they have an emergency situation. Okay, everyone should have seen this coming. For a man who has no self-control, keeping him locked up under constant surveillance is not going to end well for us. There's no reason to think that a narcissistic genius is going to behave under these circumstances, and it's only a matter of time before he starts to use his powers for personal gain. If you could do anything you wanted without getting caught, there's no way you'd be willing to waste your time locked in a research lab as someone's guinea pig. And that's why if it were me, I would have taken measures to guarantee Sebastian here has no chance of going invisible whenever he wants. Now, these scientists here had the right idea, but using a silicone mold was a very big mistake. The smarter approach would have been to dye his skin with a chemical that couldn't be rubbed off easily. One of the best ways to do this is with a compound known as dispersed red 9 or 1-methylaminoanthraquinone. This is the same chemical that some banks will plant inside bundles of cash and are set off when a bank robber triggers the device. The reason it's so effective is because it doesn't just stain the money, but it also stains the robber's skin and has been known to last 3 to 4 days before being able to wash it off. I would have forced the man to dye his skin every day with this compound as a precaution, so that even if he escapes, it will limit his chances to take advantage of his invisibility, and we'll have a much easier time keeping track of him. This way, he'll still need to follow social norms because people will be able to see his body, and it forces him to behave like someone is always watching. It would also be a good idea to inject a tracking device into his body, and if they already have the technology to turn someone invisible, it's not a stretch to think they would be able to do this too. Now, it turns out this man is quite the pervert, and for some reason, this was how he wanted to spend his once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be invisible. But if I'm being honest, there are much better ways to take advantage here. If it were me, and I had the chance to explore my darkest desires for a week, the obvious decision here is to compile a list of people you hate and pretend to be a ghost. I would then haunt their houses one by one, making my enemies freak the out, and watching bad people get what they deserve is something I would pay a lot of money to watch. With this in mind, it's very likely the man will start using his invisibility to get revenge on anyone who stands in his way. If this group was thinking ahead, they'd realize this is going to get out of hand, and for a group of scientists, they're not planning this out at all. Just like you're not planning out your meals, which is why you need HelloFresh. Receive fresh produce delivered directly from the farm in under a week's time, and enjoy foolproof recipes prepared in 30 minutes or less. Cooking has never been easier with clear clear step-by-step instructions to let anyone participate in the fun. The HelloFresh website is simple and easy to use, just like the clean eating recipes that they provide their customers. I love these delicious recipes as much as the Hollow Man loves his brand new superpowers. Saving hours on food prep makes eating healthier options much easier for me. Offering veggie, pescatarian, and fit and wholesome meals, HelloFresh has something for every type of diet. Not only that, Hello Custom gives you the ability to swap out specific ingredients to suit your exact dietary needs, whether that be more protein to a veggie meal or upgrading your meal for a more deluxe experience. Last but not least, HelloFresh is the first ever carbon-neutral meal kit company with nearly all packaging being recyclable. Keep your family and friends healthy along with the environment. Use my link or go to HelloFresh.com and use code POGHTBSEP16 for 16 free meals across 7 boxes plus 3 surprise gifts. Thank you to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video. At the research facility, the team is told that Sebastian has escaped, and the woman warns that if anyone finds out, the project will be shut down. But that's when the scientist walks through the door. The coworker demands to know where he's been, and the man lies, saying he only went to pick up some belongings. But Linda doesn't believe him. She's found evidence he was abusing his invisibility and threatens to report him to the science committee if he ever leaves again. He thinks she's bluffing, but the researcher makes it clear that he will be confined here indefinitely. Annoyed, the scientist returns to his room, but soon he's going to start his murder spree. The next morning, the team gathers at the lab as Matt shows them his latest findings. The man might have found a way to turn the scientist back to normal, but the simulation fails at the last second. They still don't have a cure, and the invisible man is going to be stuck like this forever if they don't find another breakthrough soon. Furious, Sebastian tries to figure out how to escape when he suddenly remembers there's a security monitor on the ceiling. The man realizes they're watching his room, but it gives him a brilliant idea. Acting quickly, he walks into the lab while one of the researchers isn't looking and takes a bunch of computer components back to his room to sabotage the security camera. Later in the observation room, his coworker Frank feels someone touching his hair and quickly turns around. But when he checks the camera, he sees the invisible man laying on his bed. The guy doesn't know that Sebastian has looped the video feed and already broken out of the facility. Finally free, the man climbs up the fire escape of his ex-girlfriend's apartment and is shocked to see the woman with her coworker Matt. It makes him so jealous that he smashes the window in a fit of rage and quickly runs away. The researchers look outside to see who is spying on them, but there doesn't seem to be anyone there. Suspicious, the woman lunges for the phone and calls the lab, asking if the scientist is still in bed, but their coworker confirms the man has been here the whole time. Later, Sebastian returns to the facility, furious that his ex-girlfriend has moved on. Everything about this situation is driving him insane, but that's when the invisible dog starts barking at him. Acting out, he decides to approach the cage and brutally kills the animal to shut him up, but this is going to be a huge mistake. The next morning, Sarah here is doing her rounds when she notices that something is wrong. The invisible dog has somehow been killed, and the woman immediately goes to the scientist's room to find out what happened. Suspicious, she asks him if he noticed anything strange last night, and the man says he was asleep, but the woman doesn't believe him. Leaving the room, she tells the others about what she saw, and together they watch the surveillance footage, but there's no evidence Sebastian had anything to do with it. Okay, this was a huge mistake. Up until this point, the research team has been putting up with their boss's antics, and so far maintaining plausible deniability has worked in the man's favor. Nobody can prove that he's actually done anything wrong, but killing this dog has just changed that completely. This research lab is not only underground, it also can't be accessed by anyone not working on this project. The only entrance is this single elevator, and it's activated by voice command, so nobody else would be able to sneak inside. This is already enough to tell everyone that Sebastian here killed this dog, because the others wouldn't have any incentive to do this. If the woman was thinking clearly, she wouldn't bother asking him where he was last night, and it's not hard to assume that a genius scientist is capable of looping the security cameras. Now, it's important to point out how stupid this couple is at the moment. They're secretly having an affair, and don't want Sebastian to find out about it, but if they already know the man is capable of escaping the lab and has been constantly making passes at his ex-girlfriend, we can assume he won't be happy to find out who she's dating. If he's willing to do this to a dog, then you can be damn sure he's willing to push his enemy down a flight of stairs and kill him as long as he thinks he can get away with it. This man is in serious danger, and that's why if it were me, I would have kept this relationship a secret for as long as possible. Meeting up and laying around in bed is a surefire way of getting caught, and if there's reason to think our lives might might be at stake, we shouldn't be taking unnecessary risks. At this point, what they should have done was added more precautionary measures to keep themselves safer, and instead of a surveillance system, they should have turned this place into a full-blown prison. Now, obviously, they don't have the skills or the time to start building a brand new environment for him, but the good news is that they don't have to. As I mentioned earlier, this place is already underground with only one way out, and only people with security access can move around the lab. That's why the simplest solution is to delete his security clearance, override the doors to both his room and the hallways so that they remain locked, and have heat-sensing cameras installed into every single corner of the lab. If the man doesn't have clearance, this place effectively becomes a prison, and even though it will piss him off, we can't afford to let him out. These scientists weren't doing any of this, and it's about to backfire on them hard. That night, Linda heads back to her apartment, but that's when she suddenly hears a strange noise. Suspecting Sebastian is here, she throws a sheet into the air to catch him, but it falls to the floor. Nobody is there, but the woman is so terrified that she leaves as quickly as possible and heads back to the research facility. Arriving at the lab, she investigates the scientist's room and discovers that he isn't in bed. It makes her realize that he tampered with the camera, and she opens it up to find it completely rewired. Picking up the phone, she tells her co-workers to gather at the facility and reveals the scientist hacked the surveillance footage. The situation is getting out of control, and with no better options, the researcher insists they need to tell the committee about what's going on. None of them realize the Invisible Man has overheard everything, and he's going to do whatever it takes to stop them. Later that night, Sebastian goes to the project supervisor's house, where he finds the researchers telling the man everything. He explains he'll have to report this to the Pentagon immediately, but this is the last time they'll ever see him again. Walking back inside, he tries to make a call, but that's when the line suddenly goes dead. It's strange. But then he notices something else. His back door is swinging shut like somebody just walked out, and the old man goes to investigate but doesn't see anyone. Confused, he lights his pipe and is about to head back inside when the Invisible Man appears behind him, pushing the supervisor into the pool. Diving in after the guy, Sebastian holds the man under the water until he finally goes limp, and the scientist leaves no trace that he was ever there. The next morning, Linda arrives at the lab, but is confused that the supervisor hasn't contacted them yet. Frustrated, she decides to call the old man, but the person on the other end tells her that he mysteriously died last night. Shocked, the woman tries to contact a general at the Pentagon, but suddenly the connection cuts out. Someone has sabotaged their communication systems, and they head out to alert security, but when they enter the elevator, it won't accept their passwords. All of the authorization codes have been changed, and that means they're trapped here with an invisible psychopath. The researchers tell the others what just happened, and the team tries hacking into the security system, but that's when they see that the only person who can use the elevator now is the Invisible Man. The group has no choice but to confront him, and heading out to his room, they bring along a few pairs of thermal goggles, but Janice isn't so lucky. She walks back to grab one for herself, but as she goes to join the others, Sebastian suddenly appears out of nowhere and murders the woman in cold blood. Okay, this is terrifying. The man has just started a murder spree, and he's about to go after every single person in this building. The scientists had the chance to make Sebastian their prisoner, but they waited too long, and he used the same strategy on them instead. The good news is that as long as we protect the control room, then we can figure out where the man is and flush him out. The first thing to do in this situation is gather all of the crew members here to make sure we're accounted for. It's easily the safest place in the building because it has two entrances, a reinforced steel door, and surveillance feeds for every room in the facility. If we let the Invisible Man get control of this room, then we're screwed, and that means we have to protect it at all costs if we want to survive. Now, it's important to remember that even though his body is see-through, the man is still flesh and blood. The serum allows light waves to pass through him, but he's completely solid like everyone else. This means as long as he's forced to interact with physical objects, we'll be able to see Sebastian's position in any room, and this strategy will give us the upper hand. A good way to use this against him is to fill the room with smoke so they can see the particles hit his body. This is something that they try later with a fire extinguisher, but the problem is that it also makes it harder for us to see anything as well. And that's why if it were me, I would take this strategy to the next level. Instead of using smoke, I would set a trap by pouring water into the rooms and flooding the lab. It might sound extreme, but it gives us an overwhelming advantage, because in order for the Invisible Man to reach us, he would need to walk through the water. If the rooms are flooded, there would be no way for him to hide his location, and it gives us a better chance of taking the man down. We already have heat vision goggles, but they can be easily damaged, and it won't take much for Sebastian to eventually find all of the heat sensors in the building and destroy them. So having a foolproof method of detecting his movement is going to give us the best chance of staying alive. As an extra precaution, I would also gather the medical equipment and pile everything up against the far wall so that the man can't try walking or jumping on platforms above the water to reach us. Meanwhile, the team walks into his room and finds no traces of him anywhere. Frustrated, Linda picks up a phone and tells him to stop hiding, but that's when they hear his voice on the intercom. The Invisible Man reveals that he killed the supervisor so no one will be coming to help, and makes it clear he won't let them leave this place alive. Suddenly, they notice that one of their co-workers is missing and run back to search for her, but there's nobody in the lab. Using thermal goggles, the woman spots a heat signature in a locker, and the team thinks it might be Sebastian, but as soon as they open it, their co-worker's dead body falls out. The research team is horrified that the scientist would murder someone like this, and Linda tells the technician to hack the computer system so they can make new access codes. Everyone else will hunt down Sebastian, and Linda's got a plan to beat him. Activating the motion detectors throughout the lab, they track down the Invisible Man's location, and two of the researchers head out to confront him, but as the men try to corner the guy, they're told the scientist has disappeared on the motion detectors. They don't know where he is, but that's when Carter spots a heat signature behind some pipes. His co-worker sneaks up and fires his tranquilizer gun, hoping it'll hit Sebastian, but it's a false alarm. The heat they saw was coming from a floor vent, but that's when this guy hears his friend choking and turns around to see him being strangled in the air. Knowing the Invisible Man is lying on the pipe above, the researcher tries to shoot him down and hits a temperature gauge that sprays hot steam directly into the scientist's face. Furious, he throws their co-worker, and the man falls into a lever, cutting his throat open. Matt reports what just happened, but Linda warns him to get out of there before the Invisible Man kills him next. That's when the pipe breaks, and Sebastian comes riding out of the steam, pushing his co-worker over. Getting back up, the researcher chases after him, but there's nothing Matt can do to stop him from closing the door. To make matters worse, the evil scientist is still on his side of the hallway, but is cleverly using the heat from the vents to avoid being detected. Terrified, Matt tries firing another dart, but realizes that he's all out of ammo. Grabbing a fire extinguisher, the man starts spraying it into the air to find where Sebastian is, as the Invisible Man threatens him for hooking up with his ex-girlfriend. The man is overcome with jealousy and punches the researcher, knocking him to the ground. That's when the door opens and Linda rushes forward so she can drag her boyfriend back to safety as the doors quickly close shut. Okay, this is getting out of hand. These are some of the most intelligent scientists in the world, but even though two people have been murdered, they've decided to make this fight about a girl. It's incredibly stupid, but the bad decisions don't end there. Moments earlier, this researcher made the mistake of firing the last of his ammo at nothing, and I think it's fair to say nobody here will be winning a Nobel Prize. Now, as basic as it seems, getting into a fist fight might actually be a much better idea than it sounds. So far, the biggest problem has been trying to figure out where the Invisible Man is hiding, but ironically, getting into a fist fight actually makes this problem a lot easier to solve. If the man is taking swings at you, then it gives us a rare opportunity to know exactly where he is. That's why if I were in this situation, I would take off my shirt, and as soon as we confirmed his position, I would tackle him to the ground. Then, we can quickly hold the shirt over the man's face, and this will let us aim our punches without accidentally hitting the floor. Now, this strategy would make a lot of sense if we wanted to fight fairly, but we can't overlook the fact that the Hollow Man is fighting in his birthday suit. This guy is trying to rock out with his invisible out, and it might be the biggest mistake yet. If Matt here was thinking clearly, he should have tackled him to the ground and grabbed him by the jewels to make sure he couldn't get away. Then, if he had saved his one last tranquilizer dart, he could have stabbed him with it and ended the fight. It's also worth remembering that earlier, when Sebastian first woke up from the experiment, he complained about how bright the lights were. The reason is because his eyelids had become transparent, but this was something nobody considered taking advantage of. If they wanted to hunt this guy down, it would have made a lot of sense to have everyone bring flashlights with them. As simple as it sounds, this would be extremely effective to stop Sebastian from sneaking up on us, because his entire body is transparent. That means even if he raises his hand to cover his face, the light will shine straight into his eyeballs. The only way to avoid it is by looking away, and this makes it a very useful tactic to prevent him from ambushing us. Meanwhile, the rest of the team find their injured co-worker, and the redhead tells the technician to stay with them while she gets supplies. She leaves him alone in the hallway and heads to the supply room, but that was her biggest mistake. The woman grabs some bags of paint, but as she's about to leave, the door suddenly closes. Terrified, she realizes that the Invisible Man is here, but doesn't realize that the Invisible Man has snuck behind her, and there's no way to survive. The remaining researchers find their co-worker and ask where the woman is. Frustrated, he tells them she's in the supply room, and the researchers head over there as quickly as possible. As they walk inside, they discover Sarah's dead body in a corner of the room, and it's clear the Invisible Man killed her, but they don't realize he's still here. Suddenly, the scientist attacks her co-worker with a crowbar, murdering him in cold blood. Horrified, Matt runs in to check on the man, but that was his biggest mistake. He's stabbed in the gut by Sebastian and collapses to the ground as his girlfriend rushes rushes over to help. That's when the scientist shuts the door and locks them in from the outside before turning the temperature down to sub-zero. It's only a matter of time until they freeze to death, and the boyfriend is already going into shock. Desperate, the woman tries breaking the window with the crowbar, but it's useless. The glass won't shatter, but then she comes up with a clever idea. She quickly rigs an electromagnet out of the materials in the room and hooks it up to a defibrillator. Pressing the device to the door, the woman magnetically moves the bar out of the way and manages to set them free. She drags her boyfriend out of the room and immediately sets a barrel full of paper on fire. It should keep him warm until he wakes up, and she leaves the room with a tank of flammable gas. Meanwhile, Sebastian is in the lab creating a compound and tests it out, watching it explode on impact. After mixing more of them, he puts the vials into a device and sets a timer. In 5 minutes, this whole place is going to blow up, and the Invisible Man walks into the elevator, confident that he'll escape. But that's when Linda catches up. Furious, she lights the end of the gas tank and sprays the murderer with fire, burning him alive. Okay, Linda is a badass. After getting locked inside a freezer, she made an electromagnet out of a box of scraps and escaped. It's clear the woman is resourceful, but unfortunately, she didn't use any of her brains to help keep her boyfriend alive. The first mistake was pulling the crowbar out of his stomach, because if it had pierced any of the man's major blood vessels, then leaving it in would help plug the wound to minimize his blood loss. As counterintuitive as it might seem, she should have left him there and told him not to move until she either kills the Invisible Man or help arrives. The next mistake was starting a fire to help his hypothermia. Even if there was a way to contain the flames, placing an unconscious person in an enclosed space with a fire is not a good idea. With flames this high, it's very possible that the man's clothes could catch fire, and the better decision would have been to move him away from the cold air, take off his wet clothes, then wrap him in the dry clothes of her other dead co-workers. The bad news is this would definitely take more time, and since this place is going to explode in less than 5 minutes, the best decision would actually be to leave the man for dead. Now, this woman doesn't know that there's a bomb yet, but if Sebastian thinks he's killed all of his co-workers, then there's obviously no reason for him to stick around. He's also the only person that still has the access key to the elevator, and that means if we don't stop him, we'll be stuck down here forever. That's why if I were her, I would run to the elevator before he leaves us here and make him an offer he can't refuse. It's important to remember that this man has been trying to get back together with Linda for the entire movie. At dinner, he asked if they could make it work again, and he made several passes at her in the lab. He was also curious enough to spy on her apartment, and with this much consistency, it's clear we could use this to our advantage. That's why the best thing to do is make a deal to save our lives, and offer to get back together with him. Now, this man is a genius, so it's very unlikely he'll believe a word we're saying, but the good news is that he doesn't have to. The man is driven by pure ego, and would relish in the opportunity to make his point as dramatically as possible. The best trap for a narcissist is to get them to talk about themselves, and if we hand him this opportunity, he won't be able to resist. With this in mind, all we need to do is catch him in the elevator and distract him long enough to slice his neck with a scalpel. As long as he's already spoken his voice recognition security code to use the elevator, then we'll be able to ride it up to the surface and call for help as he bleeds out. He leaps out of the elevator and desperately tries to put himself out, but the woman chases after him. She keeps on burning him as he takes off his disguise until the invisible killer manages to run away, vanishing into thin air. Thinking quickly, Linda fires at the sprinklers and sets them off throughout the facility. The water should reveal the scientist's outline, but the researcher has no idea he's right behind her. Sneaking up, he knocks the woman to the ground and steps on Linda's throat, suffocating her to death. But at the last second, Matt swings a crowbar at his head. The serial killer collapses to the ground, and the researcher seizes the opportunity to help his girlfriend up, but as he's walking away, the Invisible Man gets back to his feet. He tries to attack them from behind, but Matt pushes him away and the crowbar lands straight into an electrical circuit, shocking him. The scientist is out cold, and the others quickly head to the lab to see if he sabotaged anything. They discovered the makeshift bomb that he set up, but there's a problem. There's less than 30 seconds until it goes off, and the survivors have no choice but to use the emergency ladder in the elevator. They both manage to climb up and get into the shaft, but they're still in trouble. The explosion tears apart the facility, and the shockwave from the blast launches the elevator carriage straight up. The survivors flatten themselves against the walls, narrowly avoiding getting smashed to death, but then they realize it's coming back down. The researchers are terrified, but the elevator luckily stops before reaching them. They have a chance to get out of here and quickly head for the surface, with no idea that the Invisible Man is right behind them. He latches on to the woman and pulls her off the ladder, setting them falling onto the elevator. The murderer demands one last kiss from her, and the woman gives in, but secretly grabs a hold of a cable. At the last second, she steps on a lock and detaches the wire from the elevator, sending the Invisible Man falling to his death. With that, the nightmare is finally over, and the survivors are able to leave the facility, thankful that they don't have to look at Kevin Bacon's bacon strip for the rest of their lives. But what do you think? How would you beat Hollow Man? Let me know with a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe, and check out the How to Beat playlist for more videos like this. Until next time, have a damn good day.